first time ever that the paintings of this mysterious artist have been brought together as an exhibition. We've seen individual paintings in exhibitions in different museums, exhibitions from the collections, but this is the first time that we have an exhibition with works of the Master I.S. Yes, we have a painter, an artist who was probably active in Leiden in the Netherlands in the 17th century, but who signed their paintings with his initials, I.S. And so far we haven't come across a full signature, and we haven't been able to find out the identity of the painter. So all we have are the initials or the monogram I.S. And we can't even be sure if it's a he or a she, because when we don't know the painter's identity, we don't know if it was a man or a woman. But considering that some of the paintings are probably self-portraits, our hypothesis is that it was a he. I think what makes this exhibition and this artist really special is that the works are of such high quality. It would be easy to make an exhibition of an unknown artist's paintings. There are plenty of artists whose identity has remained unknown or who are not known for the general public, but for an artist with works of such extraordinary quality, it is a mystery how these works have been confined to the margins of art history. The best of these paintings are stunning, so it's high time that they're presented to the wider audience, and hopefully with this exhibition we also might gain more information of the artist and find more works that can be attributed to the painter. In April 2022 we organized the first Serlachius seminar here in Mantte, and the invited keynote speaker was Dr. David de Wit from Rembrandt House in Amsterdam. David talked about Rembrandt, but he also mentioned the painting that belongs to the collection of the Gösta Serlachius Fine Arts Foundation, Old Man with a Fur Hat, that we see behind me here. It was purchased in the 1930s as a painting by Jan Lievens, and it has remained misattributed to Lievens ever since. So David mentioned that already in the 80s the painting had been attributed to the Master I.S. or Monogrammisti I.S. as he is also known, but it had remained misattributed to Jan Lievens. But David also mentioned that Professor Volker Manut, a German art historian who worked as a professor of art history in the University of Nijmegen, had been studying the work of the Master I.S. for many years. And David also mentioned that there has never been an exhibition of the works of this artist. So I think he was half joking when he said that you should have the exhibition here, but I was in the audience and I thought this is an excellent idea, and we must have this exhibition here in Mantte. The total oeuvre is nowadays somewhere between 25 and 30 paintings, depending a bit on the attribution, but also if we count also works that we only know from black and white reproductions, because some of the works are still missing, some of the works might have been destroyed. So I'd say that the total oeuvre is somewhere around 25 to 30 paintings, and we have 14 of those paintings in this exhibition. In addition to these 14 paintings by the master, we also have 4 contextualizing paintings by other Leiden artists. Because we don't know the identity of the painter, we are not sure if he was indeed Dutch or if he hailed from another country, but on stylistic grounds we can be quite sure that the artist spent time in the Dutch city of Leiden, probably in the late 1620s or early 1630s. It's apparent because there are so many stylistic influences in his works by famous Leiden painters, Rembrandt, Jan Lievens, Gerrit Douw, David Bailly, and others. So we can be quite sure that he was working in Leiden. We can't be sure if he studied with these artists or not, but he was familiar with their work, I'm sure. And one of our hypotheses has been that the artist did come from somewhere else, but moved to Leiden perhaps to study there because Leiden was and still is a famous university town. So many people came to study in Leiden from different countries. And there are many references to books and to scholars and to studying in the paintings. So this might support the theory. The Master I.S. is probably most famous of his portraits, but another theme that recurs often in his oeuvre is paintings of students or elderly scholars in their studios. And this is also from a Leiden tradition. Here we see a painting by Gerrit Douw, a self-portrait of the painter in his studio, where we see the self-portrait of the artist with his painting equipment and also a table still life with these vanitas symbols. So this was the tradition, and the Master I.S. did many similar paintings. He knew the tradition, he could do it, he respected it, but he also, like other Leiden artists, he was also innovative. And one interesting painting is Young Scholar Half Naked, we see here, because here we see that the artist has taken the Leiden tradition, represented by Douw, for example, and done something completely different with it. It's quite an unusual painting, first of all, because the scholar doesn't wear a shirt, as we can see. His hands are clenched in fists, and he's looking directly at the viewer. One book has been thrown on the floor, and there's a chain attached to his leg, and so on. So this is all quite unusual for the time. Actually, this is one of the works that we think might be a self-portrait, because the same figure with the long hair and thin mustache appears in other works by this artist as well, also in a context that seems to refer to a self-portrait. The Master I.S. got many of his influences from Rembrandt and Lievens. Both these artists started depicting elderly people. They were fascinated both by the technical difficulties, how to portray an aging, wrinkled skin. So one of the things that also interested Rembrandt and Lievens was the brevity of life. The painting Old Man by Jan Lievens is interesting and important because, as I mentioned earlier, our painting by the Master I.S. has been attributed to Jan Lievens for a long time. So in this exhibition, the spectator will have the chance to see these both paintings and works by these two artists, to be able to properly compare the works and compare similarities as well as differences. So that's a unique opportunity. And here you see a painting by the Master I.S., portrait of an old woman. It's one of the master's best works, at least in my opinion, and you can really see how the artist developed throughout the years. One of our hypotheses has been that the painter might not have been a professional artist, but rather a gifted amateur who just got really, really good really fast. And what supports this theory is that while in some of the early works we still see sections that might be a bit more clumsy and not that well painted, but then through the years he keeps evolving, and as we can see from this elderly lady, he really becomes a master in the end. So the best portraits by the Master I.S. are stunning. And also what I think is fascinating with the portraits and other paintings by the master is the fact that while all stylistic evidence seems to refer to Leiden and the Netherlands and to Dutch 17th century painting, everything else in the paintings, or at least much else, seems to refer to a completely different geographical location. If we look at the clothing of the people, if we look at interiors and furniture and other details that we see in the paintings, they seem to refer more to Northern Europe or Eastern Europe and the cultural region around the Baltic Sea. So this is one of the things that we've been pondering about, if the artist did in fact originally come from Eastern or Northern Europe and moved to Leiden to study, or if he was a Dutch artist, did he travel to these different places? The reason why we think that at least some of the costumes have been made up by the artist is because there's a certain detail that keeps reappearing. Here and there, and here in this painting, we see a floral motif, a small flower in the color of the lady, and this floral motif keeps reappearing in different paintings, in different pieces of clothing, and in different parts of this clothing. So that's why we feel that this can't be a realistic detail, but rather something more similar to a signature by the artist. So a motif that he keeps reappearing so that people will know that this is his painting. And this detail was mentioned by Marieke de Winkel and Volker Manut in their article in the exhibition catalogue that we published, Master I.S, Enigmatic Contemporary of Rembrandt. This was a collaboration, not only the catalogue but the whole exhibition project. It's been a collaboration between Serlachius and Museum de Lakenhal in Leiden, the Netherlands, and curator of Old Masters at Lakenhal, Janneke van Asperen, has been the co-editor of this volume with me and co-curator of this project. I've curated the exhibition here in Bäntä, and Janneke will curate the exhibition in Lakenhal. And the authors of the volume are myself, Janneke, and the experts that I mentioned before, professors Volker Manut and Marieke de Winkel. And the exhibition will open in Museum de Lakenhal in Leiden in October this year. We might never be able to find out who Master I.S was. We hope we could find out the identity of the painter, but before we find a painting that could be plausibly attributed to the artist and that would have a signature, it would be very difficult because there's no documentation we've come across that would help us. Well, I think that this research and exhibition project will shed more light on 17th century Dutch art. I think it's not an exaggeration to say this because it'll broaden the scope of Leiden painting that and how we've thought of Leiden painting, because despite the many similarities that the works of Master I.S has to paintings by Rembrandt and Jan Lievens, there are many differences as well, and the way Master I.S has depicted the elderly people, for example, the empathy and the dignity that's in these paintings, in addition to the fact that they're so stunningly painted, I think that this sheds more light on 17th century Dutch art and also brings a new artist to the fore in art history. I think that Master I.S should be better known than he is now, and I truly hope that this exhibition project will help accomplish that.